Hey everyone, I'm doing a video reaction that was recommended to me from somebody who left a message in the comments. The gentleman's called Stephen, and he is also the person in the video talking to Mansour. So Stephen's on the left there. Now, the topic of this is the Jinn. Now, this is from a larger, much larger video where Stephen does a really good job of countering Mansour's claims. So I'm just doing this as a small segment to begin with. And if people want me to do the rest of the video, just let me know in the comments.
Yeah.
God says that all living things are made from water.
Yeah.
Yeah? So all living things are made from water. We contain water, but we are carbon based. And another thing is that you have the jinns. Jinns are made from fire.
Yes.
Yeah? They're not made from water.
They're not made from water, correct?
Yeah, so how can all living things be made from water if jinns are made
Because
from
the
fire?
Quran already looked.
I'm sure somebody must have picked up on this before, but in all the years that I've been doing this, I can't honestly remember in all the conversations I've had. So well done, Stephen, for sort of raising this, because it is a blatant contradiction in the Quran. How can all living things be made from water if the jinn are made from fire and they are also living? So let's see Mansour scrabble around now to try and get out of this.
The Quranic statement is two types. One is general and one is specific.
Right, that's a really, really bad argument because, first of all, saying that all living things are made from water is a definitive statement. Okay, if there were exceptions, then for that statement to be true, you would need to have that as part of that sentence. So it'd have to be something like all living things are made from water except for the jinn or except for supernatural creatures. There would have to be some kind of qualifier in there because anything that comes subsequently is simply going to be a contradiction. So this whole general and specific, this doesn't work. You need a higher standard for Allah than that.
Quran highlights the specific creation of the jinns, the angels, and then it tells you specifically about human being, how they're created, and especially general forms.
Well, see, I mean, that's another good point. I mean, you've also got the angels that are made of light. So now you've got three different categories of living beings. And that's assuming we don't count God as a fourth category, because presumably God is alive as well. You've got three groups of created beings that are made from three different substances. So therefore, this isn't even like a tiny exception. You've got only one class of being is actually supposed to be made from water. So the other two classes, the angels and the jinn, are not. So again, he's saying, oh, well, the Quran gives these different specifics, but then why use the term all? Because those specifics, which represent 2/3 of the classes of created beings, this sentence does not apply to. So I'm sorry, this is a major mistake.
Every living thing is from water, and the specifics say the angels are made from what? Some kind of light. The jinns are made from smokeless fire. So these specifics are already covered.
Have you got any evidence?
Yeah, but that's a really bad example. He's saying as if, like, if I just say that these are specifics, that somehow gets me out of it. No, those specifics are the things that absolutely contradict the other statement. And just think of it this way, right? If you had like a statement in the Quran, well, I mean, let's pick a statement that's in the Quran, something like all things belong to Allah. If you then had another statement in the Quran that says, oh, except this thing over there, that would render the previous statement incorrect. Or at the very least, if I'm being really charitable, you'd have to say it's very inaccurate. And I mean, let's look at something like mammals. Like when you classify a mammal, it's got certain characteristics that generally apply. But for example, if you were to say mammals give birth to live young, generally speaking, that is true. But if you said all mammals gave birth to live young, that would be wrong because you've got things like the platypus and you've got certain kinds of anteaters, and there's probably some other examples where they lay eggs, which is why anyone involved in the natural sciences, anyone who is classifying animal species, would not say all mammals give birth to live young, because the exceptions mean you can't use the word all. So he's tried to wave this away, explain it away, But it's a clear error here. So again, just well done to Stephen for pointing it out.
Of a jinn that's made from fire, a creature made from fire. So it contradicts the fact that all living things are made from jinns are living, yeah?
I'm just telling you, the Quran gave a general statement and a specific statement.
Yeah, and the general statement is wrong. That's the point. The specific one contradicts the general one.
Anything that is exception to the general statement, Quran covered that by saying, yes, the angels were created from there.
Well, then use something like most living things are made from water, or generally speaking, living things are made from water. Because the point is, you can write the Quran in a superior way by adding those qualifiers. So even if we were to accept that apologetic, it would just be general. Well, the point is that shows that the Quran is not the most magnificent, perfectly written thing, because you can improve the accuracy of it just by giving that qualifier. So you're still going to lose trying to use this apologetic.
Angels are not created from water. And the Quran talks about it, how they're created.
The angels are living.
They're living.
They're living.
Yes.
So they're not. So it's a fact.
Do you understand between?
Where it says that all living things are made from water.
These are the exceptions.
But they're not. No, it's an exception now.
I'm telling
those exceptions would need to be mentioned in that sentence. And here's another thing: bearing in mind that the Quran is supposed to have been revealed over like 23 years or something. There's no good saying, well, all living things are made from water, and then like 5 years later, Muhammad gets a revelation that says, oh, and the jinn are made from smokeless fire. And then another 2 years later, oh, the angels are made from light. Then that renders the initial statement wrong. So unless you're saying this is some kind of weird abrogation or something, but then again, I mean, Mansour said earlier that, at first he was talking about the jinn and the angels, and then he talked about all living things. So if that's the case, that's even worse. If that is actually the chronology that the verses were revealed, that's much worse, because then it just shows, well, you've already got the specifics there. So therefore to write a statement after that, when you've already said that these other living things are made from fire and made from light, to then say all things are made from water, that's an even worse mistake. So this is just a fuck up, regardless of how you look at it.
That's exactly saying the general.
Those exceptions to this falsification test.
No, it's not about a falsification exception. The Quran tells you what the exceptions are. If the Quran didn't tell what the exceptions are, and it left telling you what the angels are not created from, then you'd have to assume, without any evidence, they're created from water. But if you have a text which says they're created from fire, and the Quran tells you fire, then these are the exceptions the Quran provides.
Yes, but those exceptions, as I say, I mean, I've repeated this now, but it's worth saying, because Mansour keeps thinking that if he just repeats this general specific thing, he's getting out of it. No, those specific examples which show that all things are not made from water, all living things, show that the Quran is contradicting himself. There's no way out of this.
It seems to me like you're making it up as you go.
I'm not making it up.
Yeah, absolutely he is. Yeah, Stephen's absolutely right. Yeah, of course he is. He's. I mean, I don't know if this has ever been pointed out to Mansour, but it does just seem like he's scrabbling around. But this is pathetic. Again, just think of any other example where you made a definitive, all-encapsulating statement like that. Then you came up with something that directly contradicts it and say, oh, well, that's just the exceptions. That doesn't mean that the initial statement was wrong. Well, nobody would accept that. It's absolute garbage.
Convinced. And you can't expect me.
Look, I'm not here to convince you.
Yeah, well, just as well, because you're doing a bloody shit job at it.
Stephen, I'm not here to convince you, but I'm going to make a rational case for our belief that what I say is sound and what I say is something that is sensible and reasonable.
Well, I mean, you're talking about jinn in the first place. So, I mean, you're already outside the bounds of reasonable and rational and sensible, but carry on.
So when the Quran talks about every living thing, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ.
I mean, this is desperate stuff now. I mean, he's trying to sing his way out of it. I don't think I've ever seen Mansour sing before, but you can see the desperation in his face now that he's got to do some theatrics to try and cover over it. I mean, but you can say it, you can sing it, you can hiccup it. It's not going to change the contradiction.
This refers to the all general things. But when the Quran says we create
the all general things, I mean, that is kind of a contradiction in itself. If it's all, it means everything. You can't get out of it. If it was just saying, generally speaking, it would mean not all. So it doesn't say that. It says all living things.
created وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ
I mean, the more singing, I mean, he's getting as bad as Mohammed Hijab now with this.
مِن نَارٍ gives you the exception. The Quran gives you the exception. If
The contradictions, not the exceptions.
the Quran,
I didn't know what you just said there.
and we created the jinns from a smokeless fire, right? مِن مَارِجٍ مِن نَارٍ. So exceptions are provided. So these things in any way does not anyway falsify the Quran being from God.
Yes, it does, because it shows a blatant contradiction that only a human being would make. If this is an all-powerful being, this would not be written this way.
Or not, because the Quran is quite consistent in what it's saying.
It's absolutely not consistent.
And we know every living thing is made from
Have you
water.
ever seen a jinn?
Well, you don't, and it's probably just worth re-emphasizing at this point. I mean, the initial statement itself is wrong. We're not all made from water. We contain water. Those are very, very different things. But yeah, I mean, this is desperate stuff for Mansour.
Not me personally.
Not you personally?
No.
Has anybody ever seen a jinn?
Yes.
Has anyone ever recorded a jinn on
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's important though, isn't it? Yeah, he asks, has anyone ever seen a jinn? And you're like, yes. Has anyone recorded it? I don't know. Well, yeah, you don't know because number one, no, they haven't. I mean, if you actually had some kind of recording of a jinn, I'm sure it would be part of everybody's dawah. So therefore, you haven't got a recording and you won't ever have one because these beings are fictional. And now we're just going to get into a really ridiculous part of the conversation, but it is funny. Again, like Mansour trying to justify this belief.
No.
Because, you know, like, everyone's got
Are you now trying to use, this is where the problem of approach is. Are you now going to use a faulty tool to ascertain the truthfulness or the existence of something, a faulty tool? Like if I want to know how my hair looks like at the back, I can't see it, right? I say, you know what?
Oh, example 4,025,000 of why Muslims should just not use analogies, particularly these Dawa Muslim types. They're always terrible. Oh, it's painful.
Look at the ground.
See, look at him trying to buy time now by doing these theatrics. Like he has to point at the ground. I mean, I've shown this on other videos which I've done with Rob, where we look at the body language of people. But this just shows how much he is playing for time now. Like you need to point to the ground as if nobody knows where the fucking ground is.
I can't see how my hair looks like. Is that tool, the solid ground, a right tool to see my back? It's not. You're using, or you are alluding to, or implying to use the scientific methodology of empiricism to understand the metaphysical realm in which there are things beyond the physical world.
All right, what do you mean by metaphysical?
Precisely, not physical.
So it's like supernatural.
Supernatural. So you can't.
Yeah, I mean, the supernatural, metaphysical are not necessarily synonymous, but yeah, I mean, okay, so he was obviously saying what tool are you using before. I couldn't make out what he was saying. Yeah, well, the point is, what tool would you suggest? If these beings are real, if these are creatures that have some kind of physical presence, then it would be perfectly reasonable to be able to, say, record them or have some kind of physical interaction with them to demonstrate they're real. So I don't see what is wrong with using empiricism, with using the scientific method. And the point is, because there is no evidence of these beings, you're going to now try and undermine that. But if these creatures are real and they take on physical form, as jinn are supposed to do, then they should be demonstrable through science.
Use a tool to say, like, I'm going to use science to say, you know what? This is the most beautiful woman in London. And I'm going to use a scientific tool. Science is not the right tool for that.
Well, you could just say anything. You could say this is magic. Right? If it doesn't come,
No.
Yes, exactly. Magic, because that is basically what you're saying here now.
It doesn't comport to magic.
I would like you, Stephen.
Say I have an invisible dragon, they're made of fire, yeah, at home, yeah, or behind.
Stephen.
And I say you can't use your eyes or size.
What I'm asking you,
believe me.
what I'm asking you, Stephen, give me the tool. If I check that it's appropriate, then use it to verify or reject the jinns using that.
Brilliant. So Mansour is now the arbiter of what tools you can use to determine if jinns are real. I mean, I didn't realize he had such a huge authority, but do you mean give you the tool? You're the one claiming these creatures exist, so you are the one who needs to demonstrate them.
Give me a tool which is appropriate for verification.
He already did. You can use a scientific method. You can, try and record something. These beings are real. They've got a physical presence. You can see them, since obviously they can become visible. Therefore, there's your tool.
Of the jinns. Go on.
There's no tool you can use to verify something.
Then how can you then bring?
Yeah, I mean, I slightly disagree with you there, Stephen. Again, I don't want to be like criticizing Steve because he's really good in this video in virtually all of it. But yeah, I would have said, yeah, you do have a tool. You can just, you show me where the jinn is, I'll record it on camera and we'll take it from there.
It to test, to prove the existence or non-existence of the jinn.
If you haven't got a tool to verify it, you can't see.
No, not me.
Right? You can't just believe that it exists.
You are trying.
Well, yeah, he's actually absolutely right, Stephen. Yeah, he says, you can't just assume it exists. Even if we would accept, okay, well, there's no way to demonstrate it. Then if that's the case, then you've got no reason really to believe it in the first place, unless you can make some kind of, I don't know, axiomatic case for it. Like, it's essential for it to exist on something that's logically consistent. I don't know, some kind of argument like that. But just saying, I believe it because the Quran says it. No, that's not good enough.
To understand the existence of the jinn.
Yes.
But what you need to do, my friend Stephen, use the right tool.
Again, how many times are you going to say tool? You're just trying to buy time because he's got you on the ropes and you're talking shit.
Tell me which tool do you have, and I will tell you whether it's right or not.
Well, it's usual rationality, rational thinking, rational thoughts,
Rational thinking does in no way disprove the existence of jinns.
Well, say the stories.
Well, I mean, it does really, well, not necessarily disprove, but it certainly would call doubt as to why someone would believe it.
The story says that the jinns, there's the shooting stars are there to shoot stars at jinns or something, yeah, whatever. That's in the story, isn't it?
Not shooting stars, no.
Yeah, it is shooting stars. That's what the Quranic verse says. I can't remember what the verse number is, but yeah, he's talking about that part of the Quran when it says that the shooting stars are used as missiles to be thrown at jinn to keep them from approaching heaven, essentially, which is obviously another massive error in the Quran.
God is using the planetary bodies up there.
Yeah.
No, it's not planetary bodies. That's a sad attempt at a revision. It's shooting stars. And bear in mind, if it was just planetary bodies and he accepts, that these are supposed to be flaming objects, then yeah, it's not going to be another planet, is it? Because another planet's not on fire.
And using shihabun thaqib, flaming, fearful flames from there to drive away, pelt away Satan.
To drive away these creatures that are made of fire. You're going to use this stars or flames.
Not stars, something from the star.
Something from the stars.
Yeah.
Something from the start. Again, that is really, really bad, really wrong. But I've talked about this in enough detail with Nadir Ahmed, so I'm not going to go into this again.
What's so unscientific or irrational about it?
It doesn't sound scientific.
Yeah, what's unscientific about throwing part of a star at a jinn that's trying to leave Earth? So, he's dragging me back into it now. I mean, never mind that it would incinerate the planet if you had a part of a star thrown at the Earth.
It doesn't sound irrational to you.
Tell me how. No, I want to know how to you. Look, I am made of. Look.
That sounds rational to you.
No, wait.
That is pretty funny when you said that. I don't know if that came across, but it says if that sounds rational to you, I can't help you. And yeah, I completely understand. Bearing in mind that this is about 35, 40 minutes into the conversation, and he's had to deal with Mansour's terrible arguments over and over. So I can understand why at that point Stephen's just like, yeah, I can't help you, mate, if you can't get the basics.
I'm made of what? Flesh.
Yes.
So if I pick up a flesh and I throw at you, would you feel it?
Yes, I would. Yes.
Right. So if I have something made of fire and use fire to throw on them, can they feel it? Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous. I'd probably just be laughing to myself as well at this point. But I mean, think of what Mansour is saying there. He's literally saying that you can fight fire with fire. So, I mean, just think about it on a basic level. Why would throwing flames, a flaming creature, affect them? Even if we were going to assume that these things could exist. So, yeah, let's pretend we're in a Lord of the Rings world or something. Throwing fire at a flaming creature, why would it hurt it?
I don't know. Yeah, probably can. They can.
Probably can. Good. That
Oh, I wouldn't have given him that one, Stephen, man. I mean, I know you were, you were having a long conversation with him, but I wouldn't have given him that because it doesn't make sense.
it's being rational.
That's if they exist.
So no. You
You
are Stephen. Can I humbly request one thing? No. I know. Look. I know you're not disrespecting, but what I'm saying is we should not conflating between two things simultaneously. They cannot exist, and then saying how do they exist? You are asking two questions simultaneously. Oh, does God exist? If He exists, then what? If you're dealing with the assumption God exists, then I cannot expect this to happen. That's one thing. But you cannot then say this cannot happen because God doesn't exist.
Well, to be fair, I mean, there are a couple of different scenarios there because you could say that potentially, even whether a God exists or not, potentially the jinn could exist as their own kind of creature, but they would still need to be demonstrated. So it's not really conflating the questions. But yes, in terms of at least how the Quran is describing the jinns, yes, if you could show that Allah, there's no good reason to believe in Allah, then by default, there would be no good reason to believe in jinns the way they're described in the Quran. So it is an important question. But anyway, that's the end of this section. So I just thought I would do this now as a little taster. So if anybody wants to see more from this, because they cover a whole range of different stuff, there's at least another 50 minutes left of this video. And there's some really good stuff. And as I say, Stephen does a really good job throughout most of the video. And I'll be happy to do some more of this. So let me know in the comments or in the community posts, which will be up now, whether you want to see more of this. And I will see you all in the next one.